Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for a crash course in federal TOD financing. If you want to help your city build more homes and offices near transit stations but aren't sure how to pay for it, this is the webinar for you. We welcome your comments and questions about this topic, and for those of you who are following along on the web today, you can type your questions into the chat box on your screen. You can also tweet us at LOCUS Developers. I also want to let our participants know that the webinar will be recorded and will be posted on our website at locusdevelopers.org. I am Christopher Coase, Vice President at Smart Growth America and Director of the Locust Responsible Real Estate Developers and Investors Coalition. I'm also joined by Daniel Chenette from FTA, from the Federal Transit Administration, and Mike Kinsella from Holland Partners and Executive Director of Locust Oregon. We know that navigating federal programs can be very complicated and difficult and burdensome. That's one of the things that Locust helps our members do. As part of the work, we will be releasing our 2017 Federal Financing Toolkit early next week. Today's webinar will provide an overview of what's included in that toolkit. There are over 90 programs listed in our toolkit that support our work. These programs span from brownfields, community development, environment, housing, transportation, even rural development. If you get this toolkit, you'll find that it provides great description of programs and provide a roadmap on how to obtain those funds. This toolkit will be available to Locust members for free, but also will be available for the general population for purchase. All webinar participants will receive an email when this toolkit has been released next week. If you know someone who is interested in obtaining a copy, please contact Locus at locusdevelopers.org. Obviously, we do not have enough time to go through all the programs listed in the toolkit within this hour, but our panelists and I will each take a closer look at select resources focused around transit-oriented development that are available to your community. One of the newest additions to the toolkit is the new federal TOD financing programs incorporated in the TIFIA and RIF programs. Let me take this opportunity to provide some background on these two new opportunities. Next slide. In 2015, Congress and then President Obama passed a 5-year transportation bill. Generally speaking, if you talk to a lot of transit-oriented development advocates and transit supporters, it was more of the same. However, this was the first time in history that the 5-year transportation bill included a new transit-oriented development financing program. These two transit-oriented development programs were situated into two existing loan programs. The first, the Railroad Rehabilitation Improvement Financing Program, also known as RIF, and the second, the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, also known as TIFIA. To start our conversation, if your project is near commuter rail, high-speed rail, or Amtrak, you should focus on the RIF portion of my presentation. If your project is near BRT, subway, light rail, or even focused on local infrastructure, you should focus in on the TIFIA portion of my presentation. So let's start with TIFIA. TIFIA is a low-interest loan program designed to fill in gaps left by the private market. Through this, the federal government provides very flexible terms through loans, refinancing opportunities, and line of credits. Some of the flexibility included in the program includes the ability for program and project sponsors to have a longer repayment schedule, also to be able to delay their repayment process payment by 5 years, and lastly, to be able to scope your payments based on your revenue streams. One of the key changes that we did to this program, generally speaking, this program only allowed projects that are in the blue. We were able to include transit-oriented development infrastructure as an eligible project in this program. In addition, traditionally, to qualify for a TIFIA loan, you had to have a project size of at least $50 million. If you have a TOD project or local projects like bike ped infrastructure, you now can apply for this program at the $10 million level. What makes this program very competitive compared to conventional financing is that the federal government provides low interest loans. So as you can see here, as of last month, the interest rate was at 2.7. Maybe about an hour ago, it was about 2.9%. On the conventional market, you're hovering at about 5 to 7%. So clearly, you're have major savings on the interest rate. On the second program, the RIF program, it too has the similar flexibility that I mentioned in the TIP-Year program, the ability to pay your loans over a longer time period, up to 35 years, low interest, and the ability to scope your payments based on revenue streams. The RIF program, in addition to allowing you to support rail infrastructure, it now is enabled to pay for commercial and residential development around passenger rail stations, Amtrak stations, and commuter rail. One of the key things I want to note here, as you saw in the previous slide in TIFIA, which covers only 33% of total project costs, the RIF program for commercial and residential development will cover up to 75% of total costs. Of course, both of these programs have federal requirements like NEPA, Buy America, and Davis-Bacon, but of course those are information that greater details you will find in our toolkit. Now with that, I would like to turn it over to the Federal Transit Administration, represented by Daniel Chenig, who is the policy analyst at the Federal Transit Administration, who will give us more details on some of their financing programs for transit-oriented development. Daniel?
Great. Thank you, Christopher and Locus, for having me participate in this webinar. I'm happy to be here to tell you about some of the work that FTA is doing to advance TOD planning work across the country and to promote the use of value capture strategies such as FTA-assisted joint development, which can generate local revenue to pay for transit, TOD, and other supportive infrastructure. I think it's a good follow-up to what Christopher was just discussing, because value capture strategies and the revenue that can be generated can help pay back some of the loans that were discussed for TOD. So I'm going to start with a brief overview of FTA's TOD Technical Assistance Initiative, then give you some basic concepts of value capture and talk about the federal role in value capture, and then tell you also about our joint development policy. So first up, the FTA TOD Technical Assistance Initiative. We officially launched the TOD-TA initiative, as we like to call it for shorthand. Technical assistance is a bit of a mouthful. We launched it back in October 2015. And this project provides TA to communities across the country seeking to advance TOD projects and policies in two forms of TA, on-site and online. The on-site technical assistance work assists communities who are currently implementing transit projects, whether it's a subway, a light rail transit, or bus rapid transit project, and they're also seeking to spur corridor revitalization or station area planning. And this type of assistance is available to all communities across the country, no matter the size. The online portion of the TA work is at www.todresources.org, which is the virtual home for the project. And this website provides communities, including communities that are not direct recipients of the on-site technical assistance, a venue to identify resources that will assist them in their TOD activities. The website also includes a 1-800 contact number and email address for general inquiries regarding TOD in your community. The website also includes a dynamic TOD database of national resources for cities, agencies, local residents, businesses, and anyone else looking for questions answered. The initiative also implements a peer network of communities to share best practices and to facilitate peer-to-peer learning between cities that are advancing TOD in their communities. So FTA has selected Smart Growth America to lead a multidisciplinary team with expertise in providing TOD-TA, and the team provides expert advice on preserving affordable housing, securing advantageous commercial development, planning for and managing smart growth, and other assistance using a variety of TOD planning and analysis tools. Next slide. So now moving on to some of the principles of value capture. There's a long literature out there that demonstrates that transit service creates value in nearby property and other kinds of value as well. One great example is a 2010 study by the Regional Plan Association in a report entitled The ARC Effect, which looked at the effect New Jersey Transit's ARC project would have had on property values around commuter rail stations in New Jersey. The ARC project was the first version of Amtrak's current Gateway project, which are different projects with similar goals, adding 2 new tunnels under the Hudson River connecting New York and New Jersey, and other related improvements. The ARC project would have, and the Gateway project will too, significantly increase New Jersey's accessibility to Manhattan and all the jobs that are located there. An RPA in this report estimated that homes near rail transit stations in New Jersey would gain significant value due to the ARC project, an average of $23,000 per home, with the highest gains closest to the stations, effects seen up to 2 miles away, for a total potential increase in home values of $18 billion. Now that's an extreme case in the most urban area of the country, but transit can increase property values to lesser degrees elsewhere too. Next slide. So here's a theoretical chart showing how transit creates value over time, and that value begins to grow after service is announced, even before service starts, and growth continues on after service begins as well. This chart represents a broader definition of value beyond just home values. This could represent a developer's willingness to pay a fee to build near a transit station, a rider's willingness to pay to park near a transit station, a business's willingness to pay to put their name on a station or advertise near the station. Next slide. And this is a list of, back up one. There we go. So this is a list of a number of different tools that exist that enable, but not a complete list, that enable local communities to capture a portion of that value. These are all collectively called value capture strategies that create revenue streams that can help finance transit projects, TOD, and supportive infrastructure, and can create revenue streams to pay back TOD loans as well. And we can talk more about specific tools during the Q&A if people have questions about them. But I think it's important to say joint development is a value capture strategy that's used most often, probably in the number of instances for transit purposes. Sales taxes also generate a lot of revenue for transit projects. And TIF also is utilized around the country and has an enormous potential to raise revenue for TOD, transit, and other improvements. Okay, next slide. Again, great potential for transit-supported value capture strategies out there, and this graphic attempts to show that. However, the FTA's role is fairly limited, as most value capture strategies are implemented and administered by state and local governments. This is showing how the land that's owned and regulated by cities and counties is much larger than the land that's owned and acquired by transit agencies, and even much larger than the land that was acquired by transit agencies with FTA funding. So the federal role in administering value capture is limited to those instances. And the exception to that is joint development, where FTA does assist transit agencies quite a bit with land acquisition for construction staging and the construction of park and ride lots near transit stations. And while the number of properties and their size might be fairly small, they tend to be very close to transit stations, and they can be linchpins in broader station area TOD. So they're very important properties. Next slide. And one way they are important is in the joint development context. Like I said, these properties are owned by transit agencies and have an FTA interest, and joint development is the development of those properties in a way that's coordinated between the transit agency and private developers or other partners. And basically, it's a transit agency being more active in and benefiting from the development of the land or air rights above and around their stations. And there are 2 ways that joint development, that FTA-assisted joint development, or how FTA can assist with joint development, excuse me. One way is through new grant funding through one of FTA's planning or capital grant programs. And the other is the use or development of existing property or air rights that was previously acquired with FTA funding. And as I said, joint development is the value capture mechanism that's most often used for transit purposes. Next slide. So here are just a few of the goals and principles of FTA-assisted joint development. As a matter of policy, FTA puts an emphasis on value capture. We see joint development as a way for grantees to leverage FTA resources to generate revenue, which we treat as program income and can be used by transit agencies at operating expenses and capital projects. In addition to revenue through lease payments, joint development also maximizes the utility of FTA-funded projects by building TOD, which increases ridership and fare box revenues for transit agencies. And while the financial benefits are clear, many other benefits accrue to grantees and local communities, such as more efficient land use, enhanced economic development, and more. And each community and its transit agency must prioritize its own goals in developing joint development. And as a matter of policy, FTA provides our grantees and those transit agencies maximum flexibility under the law in pursuit of joint development in terms of determining their local goals and objectives and designing projects around them, and contracting with third parties and negotiating terms and conditions of joint real estate development. Next slide. And as this slide shows, joint development as a value capture strategy is working very well. Of all the projects that FTA approved in 2016, of which there were about a dozen, FTA's original investment in the acquisition of land and other resources for those projects was about $25 million. And the project sponsors have leveraged that investment to generate $277 million in future contracted revenue for transit purposes, which will directly contribute to offsetting operating and capital costs in a context where transit agencies have very limited funding. This is a huge benefit to them. Those projects and the project sponsors estimate that these projects generate an additional $335 million in local economic development benefits and private investment attracted to TOD surrounding those properties. So that's my presentation, and I just want to thank LOCUS again for allowing me to present, and look forward to the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, for that presentation. As we know, one of the challenges to TOD is providing affordable, making sure they are mixed use and attainable for all Americans regardless of income. I'm pleased today to introduce Mike Kinsella, Executive Director of Oregon LOCUS and Development Manager at Holland Partner Group, who has some really good experience on how to bring and turn TOD projects into mixed use and mixed income projects using some of the federal resources. So with that, Mike.
Thank you, Christopher. Hello, my name is Mike Kinsella, and I am the Executive Director of Oregon LOCUS and a Development Manager at Holland Partner Group. Oregon LOCUS is the first statewide standalone affiliate of Smart Growth America's coalition of responsible developers and investors, and there we have a focus on statewide and local policy related to the intersection of transit and housing. Separately, I'm the Development Manager at Holland Partner Group, which is an active developer of urban and transit investment, transit-oriented investment property throughout the western United States. Our company was formed in 2001, and we are privately held. We currently own 15,000 units of multifamily across the western U.S. and currently also have 7,000 units under development right now. And one of the reasons that we value LOCUS is the resources that they bring to today's complex development, capital markets, and regulatory environment. And the Federal Financing Toolkit is just one of those important resources. Today I'm going to talk about one of Holland's current projects, a transit-oriented development in San Diego's East Village known as Park and Market. The East Village in downtown San Diego has been at the center of recent redevelopment, anchored by Petco Park and billions of dollars in new mixed-use projects. The Upper East Village master plan adjacent to our site will include new retail, creative office, and residential development. Additionally, a new charter school will provide K-6 schooling for local residents. The project itself is located on a full block totaling 1.2 acres directly adjacent to a San Diego trolley system orange and blue line stop. This transit system was built in 1986 and today serves over 11 million riders on its 18 miles of tracks circulating downtown San Diego. And so today I'm really going to talk about a project that while it certainly benefits from the site history, from joint development strategies, really leverages additional federally enabled tools, specifically 80/20 bonds and the 4% low-income housing tax credit to achieve true attainable housing opportunities for the residents in that district, as well as education and commercial opportunities for the neighborhood as a whole. This project is approximately 350 stories. It's a residential tower that integrates a mix of uses, with 80% of the apartments as market rate and 20% affordable. In addition, the project has approximately 22,000 square feet of inline retail on its ground floor and 50,000 square feet of office, which is largely being leased to the local University of San Diego. To make this deal work, there was an interesting history. The site was originally owned by California's redevelopment agency, which was charged with developing urban property across major metros in the state of California with a specific focus on attainable housing, affordable housing projects. Of course, the redevelopment agency in California was terminated. The property, this site, reverted back to the state as original owner, and through a series of transactions was subsequently deeded to the city of San Diego. So in 2015, the city of San Diego began an RFP process for the site, where they were looking to dispose of the property, selling the property in fee to a private developer who could then create a really iconic place in the core of the East Village district, anchored by transit and the sports facility. So when we acquired when we participated in the RFP process, the city had a 15% affordable housing requirement in place. We were able actually to achieve a higher percentage of affordable units through the use of 80/20 bonds and the low-income housing tax credit program. And Holland was eventually successful in winning that RFP award because we were offering essentially another 25% more affordable units than the city was looking for in the RFP process. And again, that was very much reliant on accessing low cost of capital funds for the construction and permanent debt on the underwriting of this opportunity. So in terms of the questions that, of course, developers would be interested in terms of going through the federal application process and just the state levels of application process to access the 80/20 bonds, as well as the low-income housing tax credits, we really want to point out that when dealing with a private seller of land, it is extremely difficult to pull off a transaction like this. From the time at which we started the process of underwriting and structuring the bonds and also seeking the allocation of tax credits, it was roughly a one-year process from June 2016 to June 2017 closing of the transaction. And so it really takes a public-private partnership with a city or some other jurisdiction that owns the land, or a very patient landowner who's willing to work with the developer moving through that process. It's not a one-and-done proposition dealing with a commercial bank. We also want to point out that it is a very complex process. A lot of people are involved, and so it becomes extremely important to either have in-house expertise or seek out and retain extremely good consultants. In this case, we worked with Novogradac, a tax credit consultant out of California, very experienced in the space, as well as qualified investment bankers and transaction attorneys to pull the structure off. So in summary, the use of 80/20 bonds and low-income housing tax credits in the context of a mixed income project anchored by transportation is a great strategy, so long as you have sufficient time and you have qualified individuals on your team to bring the deal together in order to access that lower cost of capital and attractive and necessary structure to get the economics to ultimately work. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks also to Daniel for joining us today to talk about their work. Like I mentioned, we could not cover the full toolkit on this call. Today you heard about new TOD financing programs in the TIFIA and RIP program that finance commercial, residential, and TOD infrastructure. We also heard about FTA's joint development and value capture programs. And you just heard from Mike the ability to use programs like the 80/20 and LIHTC to provide mixed income, mixed use development around transit stations. But like I said before, there are even more programs included in the toolkit, such as brownfields, how to build healthy communities, as well as energy efficiency financing programs. To learn more, please visit our website at locusdevelopers.org. We're going now to open the floor for questions. If you have any questions for any of our panelists, you can type them into your webinar screen. You can also tweet us at LOCUS Developers. And I also want to remind our participants that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website later today. So we'll give you guys a couple of seconds to type in your questions, and we'll answer them as they come in. The first question goes to Daniel. Daniel, the question is, if a developer is interested in doing a transit-oriented development or a joint development project with this local transit agency, where do they start? Who do they talk to or contact?
That's a great question, and I should have included the web link now that I think about it. So you can start, a great place to start would be on FTA's website. We have a joint development page, and I wonder if Chris, you can actually just send this out to the webinar participants. That would be great. It's FTA's web address, which is www.transit.dot.gov/joint development. And that page has links to our policy, all of the documents that are required to be submitted as part of a joint development application, which is not many. It's just an Excel sheet, essentially, with a project request form. And there's also links to webinars. There was a webinar I conducted a few months ago that was all about joint development, and it could tell you many things about our policy. And my contact information is also on that page as well. So my apologies for not including that. So Chris, hopefully you can blast that out to everybody. That'd be great. Thank you.
And we will. And just so folks know, you can visit our website, locusdevelopers.org, where we'll be providing the information you heard today, as well as some of the frequent asked questions that came at the webinar as well. Next question to Mike and Sela. Could you speak a little bit more about the timeline and time frame that it took to actually acquire the 80/20 and LIHTC financing as part of your project? How long did it take to acquire?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Absolutely. From beginning to end, the LIHTC allocation and 80/20 bond process were concurrent paths, and from beginning to end, it was a 12-month process. And specifically, the first 6 months being initial conversations with the housing agency, and the last 6 months being formal submittal of the application and moving through the formal process to closing in June of 2017.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. We have a number of questions about eligibilities in terms of the TIFIA TOD program. The question on the table is, what's the difference between a subway and a commuter rail? The best way to distinguish, a subway is a frequent transit system that is heavy rail, while a commuter rail will be designated as one that shares the right-of-way with freight rail. So if you're in places like MARC here in Washington, D.C. area, or VRE, the Virginia Railroad Expressway, or if you're in the Northeast, Amtrak, along with New Jersey Transit, are a couple of examples, or the Long Island Railroad. In California, you're looking at Caltrans. If you're in California, you're definitely looking at the SunRail, are a couple of examples of how you could distinguish. So in D.C., it's WMATA. Would be more of a transit agency, and in Atlanta, you're talking about MARTA. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding about the difference between a subway and a commuter rail. So again, if you're a commuter rail system, you can use the RIP program. If you are more of a transit-based system, you can use TIFIA. The next question is, has anyone used the TIFIA process for TOD projects since the requirements have changed? Right now, I can tell you that no one has actually come in under $10 million. However, USDOT just 2 weeks ago approved a TOD infrastructure loan for about $90 million in Bellevue, Washington. The loan would supply Bellevue, who's actually doing a massive expansion of their light rail system. The $90 million will allow them to build streets, do a lot of the horizontal development, like property acquisition, utilities, and the like, and also biped infrastructure. So that's just one example of TOD infrastructure projects that have been financed by the TIFIA program. And one thing I would like to mention is that the TIFIA program and the RIP program require a repayment mechanism. So in many cases, as you heard from Dan, you can use value capture, you can use TIF districts, you can use sales tax. And in the instance of Bellevue that used the TIFIA program to do TOD infrastructure, they did their sales tax as the repayment structure. Now, another question came in: have there been any examples of the TIFIA program or rural program, TIFIA program or the RIF program being used for small cities, rural towns? Actually, just a week ago, I gave testimony on this very topic. One of the challenges for the TIFIA program has been that in order to access the program for rural communities has been a challenge due to the transaction costs. In the 2015 transportation bill, there was $2 million included to help defray those costs. So if you are a rural community who is interested in applying either in TIFIA or RIF, we can definitely work with you to access those funds to help defray those transaction costs, which had previously have been a detriment to rural communities. A next question that came on is that, particularly in terms of RIF and TIFIA, do the dollars go to a state or local public entity? So in the case of TIFIA and RIF, the answer is that it depends on who's the applicant. If you're a real estate developer, you can actually access those funds directly without having to go through a public sponsor, but it may be in your interest to allow a public entity to take those funds. So it really depends on how you're arranging the project. However, in TIFIA, private developers or private entities can apply without having a co-applicant from a public entity, unlike RIF, where you actually have to be in a joint venture with a local state government, a railroad company, or a government-sponsored entity. So at this time, I'm going to wait to let some more questions come through, and I see another one. This goes to Mike. In your experience, have you used new markets tax credits integrated into your capital stack? If so, what are some of the barriers or opportunities using those credits?
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question. Here at Holland, we have not utilized the new markets tax credits program. From a LOCUS standpoint, very familiar with the program. It does require the creation of jobs in the project, so it typically lends itself well to commercial development, hospitality development, as opposed to multifamily. But yes, in a mixed-use context, in conjunction with transit or even absent transit, new market tax credits are a great way to access tax credit equity for development.
Thank you. Another question regarding the size of the projects, particularly in terms of the TIFIA project minimum. The question is the $50 million threshold applicable to smaller communities? The answer to that is no. If you are from a rural community, you actually have a lower cost threshold, and that cost threshold is $25 million. So again, if you have TIFIA eligible projects like roads, streetscaping, biped infrastructure, utilities, for a rural community, you only have to meet the $25 million. However, you also, if you're only doing local infrastructure, you can come under the $10 million threshold too. So that gives you a couple of options in terms of how to apply to the program. Next question. Whether or not this toolkit is only for rail projects. Great question. No, this toolkit covers over 90 programs that covers not only transit-oriented development, but other economic development projects like brownfields, healthy communities, farm-to-table initiatives. As I pointed out before, there are a whole host of federal financing financing programs that impact real estate, and our team has put that together. Again, this is an update to our 2015 toolkit. There are probably 15 new programs that have been included. This will be live on our website starting on Tuesday, so if you're interested in obtaining this toolkit, I would suggest that you register then or at least sign up today to get a notification. In addition to that, if you're a Locus member, you get this toolkit for free on our website. So with that, I would like to thank both Daniel and Mike for joining this panel, and thank you for everyone participating. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to tweet us or send us directly to locus@locusdevelopers.org, and we will respond promptly. With that, thank you for joining, and we will talk to you